I think the main mistake was to lose faith in deterrence and containment against an enemy who was weaker than he appeared.
Let's say imaginary. I've got you in the White House briefing room. You're briefing a new president, not the two elderly presidents that were being faced with this election, but this is an imaginary president that probably doesn't have your depth of history. What would you say to that president about the mistakes that were made by the United States leading it? First of all, was that war necessary, yes or no, your opinion? And then secondarily, if you think it was unnecessary and avoidable, what were the mistakes that were made by the U.S. that would be a cautionary tale for a future president?
I don't think it was necessary. I think the main mistake was to lose faith in deterrence and containment against an enemy who was weaker than he appeared. And why that mistake was made is still, a subject of active debate inside the United States. But I think what I was trying to do is enlarge our thinking about that error by including this Saddam side of the story. Because if you look at the world today, we're trying to manage dictatorships in lots of different countries. Some of these characters are hard to understand. The leader of North Korea just is easy to caricature and dismiss as a kind of cartoon figure. That's how we handled Saddam. We just sort of dismissed him as a cartoon dictator, and we didn't talk to him for 12 years. So we lost contact. We lost insights into what he was doing and what he was thinking. And that, I think, is the lesson, one of the big lessons from this failure that would be relevant to that imaginary future president. Yes, it's hard with domestic politics, and it can be morally troubling to have contact with an evil adversary. But to just give in to the easy cliches of this person, is beyond redemption or beyond understanding, that's also a path to serious error. You don't have to sanitize another person in order to try to understand them.
It's it's very well put. And the world is way more complex than the black and white that we're often taught. Saddam was working on a novel, his fourth novel.
At the time of the invasion. Yeah, this was the kind of, to me, that's the evidence that for making the case that contact, even with a very difficult and disturbing adversary, is worth it, because you can get insights that aren't available any other way. In this case, we went to war thinking that Saddam was the same person he had been when he invaded Kuwait or when we fought a war with him in 1990, 1991. In fact, he was, considerably older, and his interests had changed. He wasn't interested in military affairs as much as he had been. He wasn't even interested in trying to conquer the Arab world's affections as much as he had been, except through writing. And he had become obsessed with novel writing. He had written 4 novels in maybe 5 years. His aides said that he was writing longhand for hours at a time. They were never quite sure whether he was up all night or spending his days doing it, but he would be passing these handwritten pages into them for typing and grammatical corrections, though he didn't take edits very well. And naturally, you wouldn't want to piss him off by telling him his prose was a little long-winded, which it was, in fact. He had become more interested in his reputation as a man of letters in the Arab world and as a writer. He had this whole system of subsidizing novelists and having them gather with him and talk about literature. And none of this was really apparent at the time. He was still seen as the guy in green fatigues with the pistol strapped to his belt and forever a warrior.
It's just one of these super fascinating things. I hearken back to a op-ed that was written by George Soros. Of course, now he is a villain of the right wing. But George Soros said in November of 2001 in an op-ed in the New York Times to the American government, please don't overreact. It's not clear that the Taliban is actually your enemy. And it's certainly not clear that going to war with Saddam Hussein is going to solve or accomplish anything. And yet, of course, the Americans did overreact, as you and I both know. And we've caused trillions of dollars of losses into the American Treasury. And obviously, the blood that was spilled was horrific. I had the opportunity to visit Iraq on a troop support mission in 2011. I was actually there to see Lloyd Austin, who's now our defense secretary. And we were in one of Saddam's old palaces. And he made the point that we're here now. If we leave, there's going to be this Republican Guard that we had the opportunity to pay. You and I both know this. We could have given them $100 million, and the Republican Guard could have kept track of everybody. But by making that decision, Bremer and Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld making that decision not to pay them, many of them turned into the insurgency, ultimately ended up as ISIS. And so there's a lot of things that went wrong here. And you write so beautifully about this. I think it's very, very important for people to know about it, which is why I appreciate you coming on.